Hey everyone, thanks for checking in for Dig Deeper this week. I like this one. This one's about money. I love talking about money. I can talk about money, but it's not just money. Stewarding our time, our energy, our resources, what God has given us. But I have a fun question to start off.
Okay.
Pastor Phil, what has been your biggest achievement in woodworking?
In woodworking?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it would have to go either between building my wife a headboard out of pallet wood and this and that, or building her porch swing that she wanted. She needed our porch is narrow the way that she wanted it, and so it'll fit two people, but all the standard ones that you buy are a foot too long, so I had to make a custom one.
Nice. Those are both pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I feel like those are both pretty good ventures. I think the best woodworking for me was a derby car.
Okay.
I haven't gotten to that point yet where I have to.
I have a derby car story that wounds me deep, so I'll have to tell you sometime.
All right, I won't bring it up.
It went bad.
Shouldn't have mentioned it.
I didn't mean to be cheating, and I was. We'll just put it that way. We won't talk about it.
Oh, back now they probably have so many different qualifications and all these different things to different cars.
They do, but I found a lot about if you put the decimal point in the wrong place, it throws your weight way off, and your car wins a lot, but it's illegal. But that's all we're saying.
All right, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So we're talking about shifting from consumer to steward.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of that isn't necessarily shifting from not spending money, like from spending money to not spending money, but more of how we spend our money.
Sure.
And that was one thing that you talk about is God's intent for our money is to be spent. It just depends on what we're spending on and what our priorities are on spending.
Yeah.
So what are some healthy ways to approach maybe even how we can budget as stewards?
I think it's a great point. I think whether you're talking money or time or whatever the case is, like every day we're making intentional choices or unintentional choices about where that money or time goes. We've all had those days where we get to the end of the day and we're like, where did the day go? We didn't invest our time wisely. We've also had times where we're like, how did we get where we are financially because we didn't invest our money wisely? So we know what it is to not steward things well. I think the key with all of it is just intentionality. And so when you start talking about a budget, I think the first question you have to answer is, what am I prioritizing? Mm-hmm. And there's lots of good things to prioritize. Am I prioritizing my family with this budget? That's a good thing, like you should. Am I prioritizing the comfort of my family over obedience to God? That's probably not a good choice. And so this isn't about what you have or don't have, what you spend on or not. A lot of stewardship just comes down to the order at which you're approaching things. Is God first? And then just the permissions. Am I even asking God? One of the most refreshing comments on stewardship I ever heard is, you've reached the heart of a steward when your mindset shifts from how much do I have to give God to God, what do you want me to keep? That mentality shift of being able to go, it's all, you've entrusted it all to me. Do I have your permission to spend it the way I'm spending it? I think that conversation defines stewardship.
That's really good. I think that's even for me, have I been asking God, show me how you want me to spend this, rather than, I'm supposed to give 10% or I'm supposed to save 10%.
Yeah. And a lot of people with money that are really, really, really generous, almost to a fault, give everything away, don't set anything aside, might be just as bad a steward as somebody who overspends on themselves if they haven't asked God. If God tells you to give everything away, you should. If God doesn't tell you to do that and you do, and you to the detriment of even taking care of your own family or whatever, that can actually be bad stewardship, because it all comes down to, what is God telling me? It's that dialogue with God of what's okay.
Yeah, I think for me, something that stuck out in your sermon was sometimes money might not even be the thing that's so hard to steward, but time. Like time can be so difficult to steward well when so often I have a consumerist mindset with time of this time is mine. I want to figure out how I want to use it, how I want to spend it, rather than really approaching, how can I use my time to, one, bless others, to invest in others, but God, how do you want me to spend my time?
Yeah, and I would say time is a resource. I said this on Sunday. It's more valuable than money because you don't get more of it. You get what you get, and that's it. And every day that you live, you've spent the same amount of time. There's no way to take it back. You can't add to the bank. It's just, it is what it is. So you would think that would be a resource that we would guard wisely. And a lot of times I think we give ourselves credit for guarding our time more wisely than we do. What I see mostly with people when it comes to their time is they don't want to commit it to something that locks them in because they want to be able to have a wasteful mentality with their time. They want to be like, I'm going to do whatever I want, whenever I want. I'm just going to go with the flow of life and this and that. And there's this feeling like if I commit my time to things, I'm left with less freedom on the other end. That's not actually the reality. One of my favorite statements about time is if you don't tell your time where to go, you'll always wonder where it went. And I think that's just where a lot of people are. They're just like kind of floating through every day. They've got big goals, but they never reach them because they never do anything intentional today to move towards those goals.
Yeah, and I think it's so important for us to realize that with stewardship, with being a good steward of what God has given us, whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's resources, there's always going to be an opportunity cost. There's always going to be something that you're saying no to when you say yes to something else. And what we really have to do is think through, pray through, like, is this what I want to prioritize? Is this what's really worth my time, my money, my resources? And those things that we're saying no to, are they actually things that like we're totally okay saying no to?
Yeah.
I think that's been helpful for me and Allie as we budget, as we look at how we invest in people, is the things that we're saying no to in order to say yes, like, is that no detrimental? Is that no like kind of preventing us from doing something? And so that's been really helpful for us. Something that you talk about in your sermon, and probably why this parable that you spend so much time talking about is so confusing. It's so confusing sometimes. What does it mean for us as believers to be as shrewd with time and money as people of the world are with their resources? Like, what does that even look like for us?
That is such a good question. And there's not an easy answer, but I think, it's easy to answer from the mindset of the world, okay? If your job is to take care of you, if that's your priority, if that's what you're trying to accomplish, and your job is just to take care of you, what does it look like to be shrewd in that? You're going to be really strategic in what you give your time to and what you don't give it to. You're going to be really strategic in the relationships you build in a way that, like, you're always asking the question, what's in it for me? That's what shrewdness looks like from the standpoint of thinking of self. So not just replace that with, what if my greatest goal is to honor God? What's in it for the kingdom? What's in it for Him? I got a raise at work. The what's in it for me mentality says, I got a raise at work. What are the things I want to buy? What's going to make me more comfortable? Where do we want to put that? Do we want to put that in the vacation fund? Do we want to put it over here? And again, those things are not bad. But when we ask what's in it for God, that's a different conversation. Now you get that raise at work and you're like, okay, the first 10% is tied. That's not even negotiable. I mean, we're just going to honor God with our first fruits. But God, we're going to take some time to pray about, are there some things you want us to invest in? And if He says invest in this and it leaves you extra at the end of that, coming back to Him and saying, is there anything else in the kingdom you want, or is it okay if we do this with it? And when He gives you a piece about, take care of your family, take your wife, go get a massage, do those things, those are okay. But it's all about, shrewdness is just about being really, really intentional and thinking through the consequences of the choices you're making with that time or with that money.
Man, that's good. It's real. Like it's right there. Like it's something that right now I think in anyone's life is so important to understand. It's so important to get, because I think even practically right now, like, man, we got all these stimulus checks coming in. We got all that, like, that's a blessing to so many people. But a lot of people are probably looking at it, and I know I've had that conversation of like, oh man, I could use the stimulus check to get a new car, or to save up to get another tattoo, or my wife's like, oh, I can use it to get our dog finally, like, you know?
Yep.
But I don't know that we've had the conversation sitting down saying, hey, when this money comes in, what if we ask God, what do you want us to use?
Well, and
first?
I think most people haven't even asked, what does it look like to give God the first fruits of my stimulus check? Every time there's a stimulus check, a lot of spending happens, but local church income doesn't go up, missions income doesn't go up. But if you're honoring God with your first fruits and you get a stimulus check, does it include that?
Yeah.
Well, that's extra. That's mine. That's bonus.
Yeah.
That's the government taking care of me. Okay, so what does shrewdness for the kingdom look like with your stimulus check? What does shrewdness for the kingdom look like with that bonus you got at work, with that raise? Those are all things we have to wrestle with. And it's really, really important when you have a family, because how your kids see you spend your time and money is an example that we're setting for them, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so good, and even hinting on that, like shrewdness with time is another thing I have never been great at time management. It's always been something that God's had to work on, but being shrewd with time, being intentional with time, wise with time, it makes a world of a difference. When you begin to prioritize, okay, God, like, how do you want me to spend my time? How do you, like, what can I prioritize for the kingdom? What can I prioritize for my family? And then being like, okay, what can I prioritize for me?
Yeah.
And kind of like, because it's good for us to spend time how we desire to spend time.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's only about how we desire to spend time, that's when it can become a really big issue. Going into this week, and I think we're beginning to see how all of these shifts really, really tie together. Sure. All of these shifts are kind of a move from inside to outside to external, and how we can love others well, love God well, and all these things. As we come into this week, what's kind of the smooth transition that you would talk about, and how we can continue to see these shifts really take place in our hearts?
Well, like you said, every one of them. This week will be a very different topic than consumer to steward, and consumer to steward was very different than slave to child or me to you, or whatever the case may be. But I think if I could ask people to begin to do anything in preparation, it's just saying I would be asking God, which of these shifts is most urgent. One of the things that you'll find about these shifts is, no matter which one you choose, it will lead to the need in yourself to begin to deal with the other ones. They're like dominoes. Yeah. So if you start to, view yourself less as a slave of God, having to do everything He says you have to do, to a child, when a master makes you do something, it's forced. But when a parent has you do something, it's part of being part of the family. Well, how does that affect stewardship? Mm-hmm. If you have a slave mentality, you're going to think of stewardship as God taking. Your family mentality, you think of it as your contribution to the family. So you can't make one shift without the other ones coming suit. But I think asking God, as these shifts are revealed, God, where would you have me start this journey? Mm-hmm. Because wherever you start it, you will end up eventually having to deal with all of them.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm excited. I think this week coming up is going to be one that really changes people's perspective on taking ownership of what God has called us to do.
Yeah, for sure. And
that's just, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to hear Pastor Steph preach. She's going to bring it, and that's awesome. Pastor Phil, would you just kind of cover us in prayer as we continue to transform, to be transformed by these shifts in
Absolutely. So Father, ultimately this whole series is about a shift in priority, from thinking of ourselves first to thinking of you first, and that touches and hits every part of our lives. But I just pray that in our minds we would know that you are worth it, that you're worth the shift, you're worth the wrestling match, you're worth you're worth shifting away from myself. God, one of the greatest shifts we need in our minds is from an earthly to an eternal perspective, from a fact that my life is about this life and how I feel in this life, to my life is about what God has planned for eternity, and I'm just a part of his bigger picture. Would you just expand our hearts and minds? Would you just make us open to what you want to show us? And would you, for each and every individual who sees this and who hears the preaching, would you help them begin to identify where they need to start this series of shifts in their own soul, ultimately with the goal of just being more like you? We love you and we praise you in your name. Amen.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to Dig Deeper.